Okay, this is a condensed version of chapter 3 lecture. So last week we talked about free trade and the benefits and kind of challenges with free trade. This week we're going to talk about trade agreements. So trade agreements promote free trade or make trade easier, but only between participating countries in a certain agreement. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So there are different kinds of trade agreements. So regional economic, we're talking about regional economic integrations. What are they? Are basically clusters of countries that have come to an agreement to eliminate some trade barriers, right, and make it easier to trade with each other and with the flow of goods and flow of labor. So implementation of a multitude of economic and or also political steps by member states to increase their global competitiveness, including preferential trade access. Before I go on, what kind of agreements come to mind when you hear this? Yes, Ellen.
EU.
The EU is just one of the strongest, probably the strongest or largest with most participating countries, right? European Union trade agreement, right? Between, I think, 28 or 20, it used to be 29, now 28? I don't know. Since Britain left, it was 29, Britain left.
27.
Huh, 27?
27
Okay,
member countries.
27 member countries. So it must have been 28 with Brexit, it's 27 now. Special transformation, the process of allowing efficient geographic distribution of business activities within and among the countries that are participating in those agreements. So the stages of the integration, there's, it goes in stages. It doesn't all of a sudden you open it all up. And we saw this kind of happen with the European Union. First, you have the free trade area there, that is identified through the agreement. Then you have customs union where, when you exchange goods between countries, you come up with certain agreements that all of the participating countries are going to follow. You have sometimes common or sometimes single market areas where you're going to agree on the trade agreements. And then economic and monetary union, flow of money, exchange. The European Union has a very integrated monetary union. They even use almost all the member countries use the euro as their currency now. In the beginning, when the European Union was formed, and it wasn't called European Union, it was called something else, but they did not have the currency euro. So with a few exceptions, I know Switzerland is an exception.
Switzerland's not a member state.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, which one? Yes, you're right. Well, Great Britain, England, not Great Britain. England was an exception. They used their British pounds. There was another country was it Norway, maybe?
I think Norway and Sweden still use
Norway and Sweden, yeah, they use their own currency, but all the other member countries are using the euro.
Poland as well.
Poland as well, they use their own currency. Thank you.
And other countries that don't meet the requirements to be in the Eurozone. A lot of ex-Yugoslav states that joined the EU can't use the euro.
They can't use the
And
euro.
Greece legally shouldn't be allowed to use the euro.
But they do
lied.
well. Yeah. Yes, Greece was a whole different story. Anyway, and then you have political union. Do you know of a political union more than economic one? A lot of times they're a little bit integrated. They're not going to be enemy countries politically, right? But do you know of a political union? Yes.
Maybe I don't know the name of it, but like between Mexico, US, and Canada.
Oh, that's the economic one. That's actually, yes. It used to be NAFTA, and we have that on the slides. But yeah, Diego.
Would the UK itself be considered a political union?
Yes and no. Yeah, it has to do more with.
Monarchies.
It has to do more with power and not by agreement. No.
Not
Really,
by
definitely not by agreement. It was more colonization, maybe not directly colonization, but
Like confederates?
yeah,
Like confederates? Confederation?
yeah.
Yeah.
More like
One
that.
example is Russia and Belarus.
Yes, that's right.
They
That's
don't
right.
have a
Yeah.
border, actually. This is an actual confederation.
There's no border, no actual border, right? Yes. Another one, a bigger one. Yes, let me get medicine.
Brazil, Mexico, I don't know what it's
BRICS,
called.
no, that's economic also, yeah. You're talking about BRICS, yeah.
Yeah,
You could call the US a political union of 50 smaller states which have
Yes,
some
the
degree
US,
of
yeah.
independence.
The US is also a nation, so they're just the states. It's
Yeah,
federal, yeah.
federal.
Under one
Yeah,
government.
they're all under the same government, right? I'm thinking about NAFTA.
This feels.
Maybe UAE or SARC.
I'm sorry, I didn't say, I said the wrong word. I'm sorry, say that,
UAE or SARC,
which is,
United Arab Nation and South Asian Association for
are they political?
this would be.
I'm not familiar with that one. The one I'm thinking about is NATO. I accidentally said NAFTA, I'm sorry. NATO, the big one, right? Yeah. It's really politically motivated, right? And a lot of those countries, participating countries are, the ones on the European side are part of the EU, but it's unrelated. It's different nations. There are several countries in there that are not part of the EU, like the US. US is in the NATO, but it's not part of the EU. Diego?
What would something like World Health Organization be filed under? Would it be like with this,
That's more,
not political, but like common self-interest, right?
yes, it's kind of like, that's similar to like United Nations and things like that. Those are not, those are more where they're voluntarily agreeing to help other disadvantaged countries and things like that, right? Yeah, so yeah, they're not as restrictive as trade agreements or political agreements where they are actually agreeing to follow certain laws or anything. When you're part of the like United Nations or something like that, you help them, you're volunteering. It doesn't govern your country. Those organizations don't govern your country, but the EU trade is governed strictly by the EU and all the member countries, right? Politically, NATO governs what the response of the countries to other political world events like we see with Russia right now, right? So the other ones don't really govern the countries. All right. Pros and cons of integrations. You all tell me the benefits of integrations, regional and economical integrations, really. What are some of the advantages the countries gain?
It's the same as a free trade.
Yeah,
Like, you,
exactly.
the quality of life,
Mhm.
and, more consumers.
Yes. You have similar to free trade in general, all of a sudden you have a bigger market, you have a bigger pool of employees to pull from, quality of life can improve in the member countries if the agreements are fair, or advantageous for all countries. It doesn't exactly always look equal, but overall it's an improvement, right? Let's see what other benefits we have listed here. Create a larger pool of consumers. Encouraging economies of scale and production, increasing the region's level of global competitiveness, and enhancing economic growth through investment flows. So now when you have these agreements, each country can focus on their competitive advantages and be really good at what they do, because they can now export their goods to other countries and they have a bigger market in those areas while they're offering their market to another country that might have an advantage somewhere else, right? And there's a lot of investment inflows coming into a country through these free trade agreements. It also reduces the risk of investment when you have these agreements. Free flow of capital, labor, and technology to the most productive areas of the region. And increasing cooperation, peace, and security among countries in the region. Hardly are going countries within the same agreement going to go to war against each other, right? Or are going to be politically not friendly. Encouraging member states to enhance their social welfare and match that to the most progressive states. And we've seen some of that in the EU, right? Where the countries become members and maybe they're not quite there yet, but they do become better sometimes, but then sometimes, like in the case of Greece, not so, right? Definitely not so. And we'll yet have to see what happens with, you know, other newly admitted countries, how they develop. Costs of regional integration or the disadvantages undermining the most favored nation status rule, an essential principle of the World Trade Organization, where they are coming up with most favored nations, sometimes to help those nations and sometimes to improve them, and or because they are doing things the right way. But now you have the trade agreement, you're going to automatically favor the nations that are in that agreement before you go to the most favored nation status that the World Trade Organization sets, right? Imposing uniforms, laws and regulations that at times do not take into account national economic, cultural and social differences. So, you know, every country has their own laws and their own cultural customs and values, beliefs and things like that, right? Even within Europe. And, you know, you have even other ones where you have some from South America and some from Asia that are more varying cultures than those within Europe, right? So it doesn't really necessarily take that into account, and the laws of the countries are different. You know, there's still a lot of countries, even within the EU, that practice bribery, which according to the EU you shouldn't be doing. What it's, you know, but some of the EU member countries have still practice quite a lot of bribery, and it's still accepted. Anyway, cultural differences and so forth, right? Eliminating jobs and increasing unemployment in protected industries. You know, protected industries, we talked about subsidies last week. They can suffer because the protected industries really only exist because they have been protected by the government. Now through trade agreements, they might actually diminish, right? Which will create unemployment in certain industries. Usually those unemployments are temporary, they don't last forever, because eventually the people placed out of those jobs that just will not exist anymore, period, will be trained to do other jobs, right? Losing sovereignty, national independence and identity, because they have to follow the laws. You know, again, looking at the EU, they have such strict regulations and all member countries have to follow them. You know, this goes to what imports will they accept from non-EU members, like the US? What ingredients are allowed? Which ones aren't allowed? A lot of details. You know, and if there's a lawsuit against a non-member state and there's a decision made that you are not going to do business with that, all countries have to do that, right? That are part of that agreement. This is one of the reasons. Well, I'm not sure if it's this. I'm not really sure it's a reason, but we will. Let me just throw out Brexit. Have you heard the term Brexit? When Britain left, Britain exited the EU, right? They threw it out there, and then they did a referendum, and there was a lot of propaganda against the EU and to exit the EU. And the biggest one was, we want to be independent. We don't want to follow all the things they do, right? But they didn't consider that they're giving up a huge market. And they have actually, I think it was finalized in 2016. They've been out of the EU since 2016, I think, right?
2020. They voted in 2016.
Oh, they voted in
And then
2016
voted
and they
again
left
in
2020.
2017
Okay, thank you for correcting that. Yes. So the vote wasn't, so it took another 4 years to exit, right? So, and since then, the economy has not been doing well in Great Britain. And they are now, I think, working on certain agreements with the EU, but, you know, I know a lot of people. Go ahead.
On the topic of agreements, I spoke to the British Consul General not too long ago, and he was talking about Brexit. And one of the things that he was saying was that when they left the EU, they had a lot of agreements with other countries and stuff and other things, and they've done all that through the EU. The EU just kind of took care of it. So now that Britain's left the EU, they have to redo every single one of the agreements that they had in place before that were just done through the EU. And now, like, a lot of the partners that they have deals with are wanting to renegotiate with them.
Exactly. And they have to go, every single agreement has to be agreed upon, right? Yes, that's a good point, yeah. So that's one of the reasons why probably economically they haven't been doing that well, right? And the flow of labor and investments and things like that has been affected. through Brexit, right? One of the things that the Brexiteers used in their propaganda was, because that was also, I think, when the Syrian crisis, the refugee crisis started, we're gonna have all these refugees come here and look, we're gonna, that was one of the other things that they used. And, some people were like, oh, we don't wanna have that problem here that Germany has because Germany took in a lot of refugees, right? And Germany happens to be stronger than Great Britain economically still, even with that, right? So, anyway, but they really were banking on it. We want to be independent. So it didn't really improve the economy. It didn't improve people's lives in Great Britain, that's for sure. Reducing the powers of the national government, which kind of comes with losing sovereignty, right? And increasing the problems of illegal drugs and terrorism due to ease of cross-border labor movement. Yeah, you know what? There's cross-border movement when it's so easy to cross borders. If you have a visa for the EU, for an EU country, it's called the Schengen visa. You can go to all the other countries. You have access to all other countries, right? So yes, drug smuggle could become easier once you enter into one EU country, right? Which is not a good thing. Here are just some regions of the world markets, right? So they're clustered regions, right? United States, China, and India, Myanmar, and then the European countries, right? Those are the major markets. Here are the regional blocks. Here's Brazil, that part of Africa and Australia, and then we have another cluster here. I think we have, yes. Small local markets located far from the world markets, so. Does regional integration confound global trade? Yes, we did mention the European Union. There's also the USMCA agreement, US-Mexico-Canada agreement, which was originally NAFTA, and was renamed, not really restructured, not that much changed actually since they renamed it. Not really sure why they renamed it. It was a Trump thing, I think. He just wanted to make it his own or something like that, but eventually they renamed it, right? There are Latin American regional associations, and then there's Association of Southeastern Asian Nations, ASEAN agreements, right? So we already talked about the European Union. It grew out of the coal and steel industries. The Treaty of Rome in 1957 established the European Economic Community, right? That's what it was called in the beginning. What's that?
Back for a second.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So it was called the EEC, right, in the beginning. Then we had the Maastricht Treaty in 1992 that created the EU as a full economic union with free movement of labor among its members. So if you are Italian and live in Italy, you can get a job in Germany and work there. You won't need a work permit or anything like that, right? Same with the Schengen tourist visa. But except with a tourist visa, you can't work. Economic coordination and fiscal stability is challenged by the sovereign debt crisis of some members, such as Greece. Greece has huge national debt, right?
I think one of the things that the UK missed out most is students' Erasmus programs and things like that.
Yes, the
Yeah,
flow of knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was studying there for a little bit and they started charging international fees. So they were paying, at least in Scotland, they were paying about 10 grand to go. And all of a sudden it was twice that.
Since Brexit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It affected education quite a bit as well, right, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big loss for the UK, big loss, right? Anyway, here are the member countries. UK was still there at the time, I guess this picture was taken. Not a picture taken, sorry, but whoever made this graph. It's from the 2017 edition, but it was probably made in 2016 when they were still voting on it, right? And then the US-Mexico-Canada agreement is, really started with NAFTA. It's that agreement little bit of changes in there. Major objectives of NAFTA were trade expansion through the phased elimination of trade barriers, protection of intellectual property rights, right? And creation of institutions to address unfair trade practices, how to deal with disputes, workers' rights, and so forth. Mexico is a huge production company, I mean, huge manufacturing place for US companies, right? A lot of US companies manufacture in Mexico. Actually, there's a trend, people think that Mexico is going to be the next China. I don't think it's gonna go that far, but because there are problems in China now because Chinese labor isn't as inexpensive as it used to be. So companies don't get the huge benefit of cheap labor that they used to, right? So they're looking for other sources. And it was renamed in 2020. That's this, these are just the countries, right? USA, Canada, and Mexico. It shows the Association of Southeast Asian nations is it's all similar objectives, right? To accelerate economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region, promote peace and stability through the rule of law in relationships among the countries and regions. These are the bases for them. And let's see, I think I have a map for that as well. Yes, here you go. So these are the participating countries. And then we have, these are just examples. There's so many more in the world, by the way. These are just a few examples, right? Regional integration in Latin America, there's LAFTA, Latin American Free Trade Association. These are the member countries. And Treaty of Asuncion is in 91 is among Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay. Asuncion is in Paraguay, right? And Uruguay created the Southwestern Core Common Market, Mercosur, right? So that's a big one as well. And another one, Dominican Republic and Central American Free Trade Agreement. It started in 2005. All right. Here are the Latin American ones. That's it. Okay, I'm going to stop the slides and we're going to do a discussion.